Hello, everyone. I want to introduce myself. I am Luke Haynes, quilter and recovering architect. I come from a background of art school, architecture school, various dabbling, craft, etc. My gateway craft was knitting and crocheting. I did that from small youth, lots of free time, divorced parents in college still. So I had a lot of time and I enjoyed craft making because it was something to do with my hands that didn't make too much of a mess. So I've been doing it for probably about 20 years full time. I mean, every once in a while, I'll take on some other small projects, but primarily I've been making quilts for my job for 20 years. And that looks like galleries, that looks like museums, that looks like exhibitions, that looks like traveling to teach. I've had about 160 exhibitions all over the world. I've had the luck to travel internationally to a bunch of different countries. They want me to come and talk about quilts and teach them stuff, which I guess there's no reason to say no to. So um, that's kind of the overall, but a lot of the specifics that I've been working on over the last 20 odd years is making portraits in quilts. Because when I came into quilting, it was still a lot of decorative work. I mean, there's certainly, I won't suggest that I created anything, but am sort of stitching together a lot of other ideas that other makers have brought before me, as in most crafts and most arts, really, stitched together, no pun intended. But I've got this one behind me that I can talk about a little bit just to kind of show some of the work that I've done. This is a self-portrait from last year. I do a self-portrait roughly every year, and I try to make it a bed-sized, and I try to in this case, I wanted the portrait to be life-size. So it kind of talks about the architecture of quilting. It talks about quilting through the lens of its function as well as its aesthetic. Because it's on the wall, it acts like a painting, but because it's the size that I use on my bed, it has the narrative of object and utility. So in this case, the me is made out of fabric and the background is made out of reclaimed quilts that this company just uses and then discards the scraps of. So I've got all of these scraps. So it's kind of a quilt of quilts. And so it's this conversational narrative between makers from anywhere from 100 years ago to 40 years ago to probably 10 years ago. And so these makers, unnamed makers, and I get to put them back together. So I'm having a conversation with the language created by a community of makers before me, and then putting this together and then putting myself on top of it. It's a pretty overt, I guess, self-portrait, because I'm literally stitching my own self on top of this conversation in quilting. Um, Wearing a suit jacket, wearing these cool pants. I mean, just trying to be sort of a little cheeky, as it were, kind of saying, who's this cool guy on top of this foundation of quilts? But really, it's a bit more of a intention to grab the sort of viewers to talk about, is this cool? Is it not? What is he wearing? What is he doing? What are all of these little pieces? And then kind of getting lost in the environment that I've created of this piece. But yeah, and so right now I'm working on a lot more exterior installation environments as kind of quilting and architecture combine a little bit more in my work. So environments outside and kind of quilts as experience, not necessarily just following the kind of world of high art, capital A art, but instead actually trying to create environments and have conversations that quilts can have in a way that other objects cannot have. So really pushing quilts to its extremes in every direction in terms of scale, in terms of materiality, in terms of environments, and finding ways to create those conversations is kind of what I'm working on now, and finding different ways that fabric can create and enhance or detract maybe from different environments, inside, outside, architecturally, etc. That's really what I'm working on right now. Meanwhile, also still making a bunch of portraits because that's what people pay me to do, and making other quilts for beds because sometimes I get cold, and doing all of this other stuff in between.